Hey there, night dwellers. Welcome back to Nightmare Frequency. Before we descend into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and prepare yourself for another journey into the unknown.
People think that the scariest things happen when you're wide awake, when you're walking alone at night, or when you hear footsteps behind you in an empty hallway. But sometimes the most terrifying things creep in when you're supposed to feel the safest, when you're about to fall asleep. This story isn't something I like to talk about, not because I'm afraid of what people will think, but because every time I do, I feel like I'm pulling it closer again, like I'm inviting it back. But if you're going to hear it, you need to hear it exactly how it happened. It started in the fall of 2018, when I moved into a small apartment just outside of Ashford, Connecticut. It was a peaceful area, tucked behind dense woods and a long gravel road, the kind of place you choose when you want solitude, quiet, and a break from the chaos of the world. That's what I was looking for, an escape. The rent was cheap, too cheap maybe, but at the time, that seemed like a blessing. The apartment was on the second floor of an old house that had been converted into 2 units. The landlord, an older man named Bill, lived downstairs. He was kind but quiet, the kind of man who seemed to have seen too much life and didn't want to talk about most of it. The first few nights there were calm. I unpacked, set up my furniture, and enjoyed the silence. There were no cars outside, no sirens in the distance, just the wind whispering through the trees and the occasional creak of the old house settling. But on the 4th night, I started noticing something strange. As I was drifting off to sleep, I began to hear what sounded like faint whispering. It wasn't clear at first, like the wind was carrying voices, just on the edge of audibility. I chalked it up to my imagination. The brain does weird things when you're on the edge of sleep. The next night, the whispering returned, but it wasn't just one voice anymore. It sounded like a conversation, hushed and fast, almost panicked. I sat up, ears straining, but every time I tried to focus on it, it would stop, like it knew I was listening. I even walked around the apartment to check for neighbors or a radio. Nothing. I tried to ignore it for a week, telling myself it was in my head, but things escalated. One night, I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m., sweating, with a dry mouth and the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. The air felt thick like the humidity before a storm. I didn't hear whispering anymore. It was breathing, slow, heavy breathing coming from the corner of the room behind the wardrobe. I froze. It didn't make sense. I lived alone. I hadn't opened the door or window. I told myself it had to be the sound of my own breath echoing back to me, distorted by the old walls or the furniture. But the moment I held my breath, it kept going. Steady. Deep. As if something was trying not to be noticed. I finally gathered the courage to flip on the bedside lamp and look toward the corner. Nothing. The room was exactly how I left it, but the moment I turned the light off again, the breathing resumed. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went downstairs and asked Bill if anyone had lived in the apartment before me. He looked up from his coffee and stared at me a little too long before answering. "Yeah," he said. "Couple of people. Not many stayed long, though. Said it felt off." "What kind of off?" I asked. He shrugged. Some said they heard voices. One guy said he woke up with scratches down his back, thought he was sleepwalking or something, but he left in the middle of the night. Didn't even take his deposit. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask more, but he had already turned back to his paper, clearly done talking. That night, I stayed up late, afraid to sleep. Around midnight, the whispering came back. It was louder now, more aggressive. I couldn't make out the words, but it felt angry. There was something about the way the voices moved, like they weren't coming from a single spot, but sliding around the room. I decided to record it. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and left it running while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. At 3:12 a.m., I heard something new. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, from inside the closet. I bolted upright. The closet door was closed, but it sounded like it was right behind it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, paralyzed. Then the door creaked open, just an inch. That was enough. I grabbed my phone, turned on every light, and left the apartment. I sat in my car until the sun came up. When I finally listened to the recording later that day, I expected static or maybe muffled sounds. What I heard made me sick to my stomach. There were the whispers, sure, but layered underneath them was something deeper, like growling, but not animal, almost like words being forced through a mouth that didn't know how to speak. Then, just before the 3 knocks, I heard a voice, clear as day, whisper right into the mic. "I see you." I deleted the recording. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want proof. Maybe I didn't want to believe it was real. Over the next week, things got worse. Every night, 3:12 a.m. on the dot, I'd wake up. Something always felt wrong. Not just the sounds. The whole apartment felt warped. I'd find objects moved, books rearranged on the shelf, kitchen drawers open, my shoes flipped backwards. Once, all the frames on my wall had been turned to face the wall. Every single one. I tried burning sage. I tried praying. I even had a friend come over and spend the night hoping it was just me losing it. But that night, she woke me up, screaming. She said something had grabbed her foot from under the bed. She refused to come back. I told Bill I was moving out. He didn't look surprised. That apartment, he said, almost to himself, it never lets anyone rest. I moved out 2 days later, slept at a friend's place until I found somewhere new. For a while, things were fine, but about a month later, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. All it said was 312. I blocked the number. A week later, another text. This one was a photo of me asleep in my new bed. I moved again. This time, far away, different state, different everything. I changed my number, got a new phone, didn't tell anyone where I went. I didn't even keep in touch with Bill. But the dreams followed me, always the same. Darkness, whispering, the sound of slow breathing, and always that same voice saying, "I see you." The worst part is, I don't always wake up at 3:12 anymore. Sometimes I sleep through the night. But when I do, I wake up with the feeling that someone was there, standing over me, watching. Once I woke up with my closet door open again. It was locked. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it was the apartment, the land, or something that just found me when I was vulnerable. But I know this. There are places in this world that want you to fall asleep. Not for rest, not for peace, but because when you're asleep, you're easier to touch, easier to reach. So if you ever start hearing whispers at night, if your furniture moves, if you wake up at the exact same time every night, get out, don't wait, because once it sees you, it doesn't forget.
Story number 2.
They say the eyes are the window to the soul, but what if something looked back at you through your own reflection? This happened in 2021 during a time when most people were still staying indoors, working from home, finding ways to keep sane in isolation. I had just moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the older part of St. Paul, Minnesota. The building was a relic, brick walls, creaky floorboards, and one of those ancient elevators with the scissor gate. It had character, the kind you only find in places that have seen too much. The apartment came mostly furnished, which was perfect for me. I didn't have much. There was an antique vanity in the bedroom, left by the previous tenant. It was the only thing in the place that felt truly out of place, ornate, heavy, and absolutely massive. Its mirror was tall and oval, with a surface so clean it almost shimmered unnaturally. I should have gotten rid of it, but I didn't. The first thing I noticed was how cold the area around the vanity felt, no matter how high I turned the heat. The entire room could be warm, cozy even, but sitting at that vanity felt like dipping your legs into a frozen pond. I thought it was just a draft. Old building. What did I expect? Then the dreams started. They always began the same way. I'd be standing in front of the mirror. Everything around me would be silent, completely still. My reflection would stare back at me, mimicking my every move, until it didn't. The first time it smiled when I wasn't, just a twitch of the lips like it was enjoying something I didn't understand. The second time, it blinked, and I didn't. The third time, it tilted its head, and I couldn't move mine. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering, sometimes with dried blood under my nose or fingernails I didn't remember biting. Still, I chalked it up to stress. I started avoiding the mirror. I'd drape a blanket over it before bed, trying to pretend it wasn't there, but every morning, the blanket would be on the floor. Every single morning. One night, I walked past the vanity to grab a hoodie from the chair, and something in the reflection caught my eye. I froze. I could see myself, yes, but behind me, in the reflection only, there was a figure standing in the hallway. Tall, thin, completely black. It had no features, no eyes, just a shape. It didn't move. It just stood there like it had been waiting for me to look. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back to the mirror, the hallway behind me was empty. From then on, things escalated. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Doors I knew I'd closed would swing open in the middle of the night. Lights flickered, but only when I was near the vanity. And always, the reflection was just a beat off. A second too slow, like it was watching me to learn how to pretend it was me. One night I stayed up. I sat in a chair across the room with the mirror uncovered, staring at it. Hours passed. Nothing happened. I started to drift off around 3 a.m., nodding in and out of sleep when I heard it. The sound of fingernails tapping against glass. Not in the room. In the mirror. I opened my eyes and stared. My reflection was sitting just like me, but its hands were raised, fingers tapping slowly, rhythmically against the inside of the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. Then its head turned toward me. Not toward the mirror version of me, toward the real me, sitting in the chair across the room. It smiled. I screamed, the kind of scream you don't remember deciding to make. It just rips out of you like your body's trying to survive. I grabbed the heavy mirror and dragged it out into the hallway, nearly throwing it down the stairs. I smashed it with a hammer until there was nothing left but silvered shards and splinters of wood. I thought that would end it. It didn't. That night, I went to brush my teeth and noticed something in the bathroom mirror. A crack. Thin, delicate, like a spider's web in the upper corner. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before. I leaned in to get a closer look, and something shifted behind the glass. Not a crack, not a reflection, a movement, fast and jagged, like someone crawling on the other side of a window. I staggered back, heart pounding, but when I looked again, nothing, just my face, pale and sweating. For days after that, mirrors all around the apartment started showing things that weren't there. Little things, at first. A figure just out of frame, eyes that didn't quite match mine, smiles that came a half second late. Once, I saw a version of myself in the bathroom mirror holding something behind his back. I backed away, shaking, and refused to use that mirror again. Eventually, I couldn't avoid them. Mirrors are everywhere, in phones, in screens, in puddles, even in people's sunglasses. And every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there, something watching, waiting. I tried to tell people. My friends said I was losing it, stress, insomnia, psychosis. I went to a doctor, got a referral, talked to a therapist, but nothing helped. Then one night, my neighbor Anna knocked on my door looking pale and shaken. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Have you been standing in the hallway at night?" "No," I said. "Why?" Her hands were trembling. I've seen someone outside your door every night for a week. They just stand there. Sometimes they knock, sometimes they don't, but they never leave." That night, I stayed up, watching the peephole. At 3 a.m., I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They stopped right in front of my door. Then the knock. 3 soft taps. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Another knock. Then a voice. Low, cold, impossible. "Let me in." I didn't. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. I waited until sunrise, then checked the hallway. Nothing. But scratched into the wood of the door, right near the lock, were 3 words. "I see you." I moved out the next day. I didn't pack anything. I left it all behind, the furniture, the clothes, everything. I moved across the country, stayed with family, tried to forget. And for a while it worked. Until last week. I was walking past a shop window, just some antique place on a quiet street in Portland. I caught my reflection and paused. It smiled. I didn't.
Story number 3.
People always talk about haunted houses. Creaky mansions in the woods, abandoned asylums, hotels with bloody pasts. But no one talks about haunted people. That's what this story is about. It began with a simple delivery. In June 2020, I was working part-time for a local estate auction company just outside of Richmond, Virginia. We handled a lot of private sales, antiques, heirlooms, weird old collections people didn't want anymore. The job was mostly driving, moving boxes, setting up estate viewings. Easy money, nothing dramatic. Until we got the Hale job. Mr. and Mrs. Hale were in their 90s when they passed, within weeks of each other. No kids, no will, no next of kin. Everything they owned went to auction. The house itself was a time capsule, dusty velvet furniture, stained wallpaper, old clocks ticking out of sync. One room, however, was locked. Our manager had to get special permission from the city to open it. Inside was nothing but a single object, a full-length mirror. It stood nearly 7 feet tall in a brass frame shaped like a doorway. Not an arch, not an oval, a doorway. The glass itself had a strange tint. Not quite silver, not quite black, like looking through smoke. There were claw marks on the inside of the glass. I helped carry it out. The thing was heavy, cold, and unsettling in a way I can't explain. As we loaded it into the truck, the sun hit it just right, and I swear, for the briefest second, I saw my reflection blink twice. Not a trick of the light. Not an illusion. A double blink, like a signal. I laughed it off. Stress, heat stroke, whatever. The mirror sold to a private bidder. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, I started having dreams. In them, I was walking through my apartment at night, barefoot, everything bathed in blue light. It looked the same, but felt wrong, stretched out, deeper, hollow, like a stage version of my home. At the end of the hallway stood the mirror. I never remembered walking to it. I was just always suddenly standing in front of it. But my reflection didn't match. It looked like me, yes, but paler, thinner. Its eyes were all wrong. Too dark, too still. Sometimes it mouthed words I couldn't hear. Sometimes it smiled, but it never blinked. Then I'd wake up, same time, every night, 2:46 a.m. Eventually, it wasn't just dreams. I started seeing glimpses of the mirror. In places it wasn't. Walking past an alley, there it was in a broken window. Scrolling my phone camera, for a split second, it would appear behind me. At work, in the shiny blade of a kitchen knife, I saw my reflection wink at me. Wink. I started sleeping with the lights on. I covered all the mirrors in my apartment with towels, even stopped using my phone's front camera. I thought I was going insane. But the worst part? I felt watched. Constantly. Like there was a second pair of eyes behind mine. I started talking to myself, not in a crazy way, but just trying to drown out the silence. I was afraid of silence. Then came the scratches. Tiny, thin scratches began appearing on my arms, on my back, on my thighs, places I couldn't reach, like fingernails grazing me while I slept. Sometimes I'd wake up with dried blood under my nails. The final straw was the voicemail. I came home late from a shift, phone dead, plugged it in, and saw I had one new message. No number, no caller ID, just a timestamp. 2:46 a.m. I played it. It was breathing, not mine. Slow, heavy, wet, like something inside the speaker. Then, after 30 seconds, a voice whispering so softly I had to press my ear to the phone. Let me out. I dropped the phone. It shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment felt like footsteps. Every shadow felt like it was leaning in. I sat in bed, lights on, kitchen knife on the nightstand like it would help. At 2:46 a.m., my bedroom mirror fell off the wall. No wind, no vibration, just dropped, face down. When I flipped it over, it wasn't cracked, but it was different. Instead of my room, the reflection showed something else. A dark hallway, long, empty, a single light at the end flickering weakly, and in the center of it, me. Or something wearing my shape, standing still, staring forward. Then it moved. I smashed the mirror with the knife. The glass didn't break. It melted, like mercury. The next day, I drove 3 hours to a junkyard in the middle of nowhere and dumped every mirror I owned. I didn't care how much money I lost, but it wasn't enough. Now, no matter where I go, I see it. In windows, in puddles, in store security monitors. Just standing there, waiting. Sometimes it moves, sometimes it smiles. Last week, I caught its reflection behind me on a subway car. No one else saw it. Everyone else saw me sitting alone. And this morning, as I brushed my teeth, I leaned over the sink and spit. When I looked up, my reflection wasn't brushing its teeth anymore. It was watching me, face blank, head slowly tilting, and then it said, without moving its mouth, "You're already inside." I haven't looked into a mirror since, but sometimes I feel my eyes doing things I don't tell them to do, like blinking at the wrong times or looking in the wrong direction. And sometimes, just for a second, I see someone else looking back from inside my own eyes, and I don't know how much longer I can keep myself in.
Story number 4.
They say some places never forget. I didn't believe that until the summer of 2019, when I took a job as a caretaker for an abandoned scout camp in rural Maine. Camp Ashwood. The job was straightforward. Keep the place secure, report any damage, and keep an eye out for squatters or vandals. The pay was decent. The property was vast. Hundreds of acres of decaying cabins, a mess hall, a chapel, and a lake that hadn't seen a kid's footprint in over 20 years. No one told me why it shut down. They just handed me the keys. a flashlight, and a journal filled with years of caretaker notes. The first week was uneventful. I stayed in the old counselor's quarters, fixed a few broken doors, and patrolled the grounds every morning and night. At first, it was peaceful, quiet in the way cities never are. But then, things began to feel off, like the silence was watching me. It started with the chapel. Every time I passed by at night, I saw a faint glow coming from inside. At first, I thought it was just moonlight bouncing off the stained glass, but when I opened the doors, the candles on the altar were lit. No wind. No people. Just firelight dancing across old wooden pews. I'd blow them out, lock the place up. Next night, lit again. The mess hall had its own thing. Every morning, without fail, the long wooden tables would be rearranged, just slightly. A chair pulled out. A plate moved. One day I came in and found all the spoons stacked in the shape of a star. The journal didn't help. It started off mundane, notes about storm damage and raccoons. But by page 60, things got darker. Scribbled entries. Mentions of the boy by the lake. One caretaker wrote, "I hear him humming. If you hear the humming, do not answer. Do not go near the water." I told myself it was a prank, some campfire legend passed between workers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the lake. It looked normal enough, wide, still, clear. But no birds flew near it, no frogs, no bugs, just silence, the worst kind. Like the world held its breath around that water. Then I found the whistle. It was hanging from a tree near the old boathouse. A rusted scout whistle on a frayed piece of rope, gently swaying even though there was no wind. I took it down and pocketed it. That was my mistake. That night I heard footsteps on the porch. Not walking. Pacing. I grabbed my flashlight and swung the door open. Nothing. But when I turned to go back inside, the whistle was lying on the floor just behind me. I hadn't taken it out of my pocket. I didn't sleep. I stayed up reading more of the journal, desperate for answers. July 17th, 1986. He drowned, they said, but I saw him crawl out, covered in lake muck, skin white as salt. He didn't blink, just walked back into the trees. July 22nd, 1986. It isn't just the boy. The woods bend around him. Time skips. I lost 4 hours yesterday, found myself standing in the chapel with blood on my hands and no memory of why. The next day I found a trail I hadn't seen before. It wasn't on any map. The trees leaned in tight, their trunks twisted like they were trying to hide whatever was down that path. I followed it. At the end was a clearing. Empty, except for one thing, a child-sized tent. Old. Moldy. Like it had been sitting there for decades. I crouched and unzipped it. Inside was a journal, smaller than the caretaker one, a child's name on the cover. Toby. I flipped through it. Most pages were water damaged, but a few survived. Drawings, scribbles, over and over again. Stick figures standing in a row, one of them always drawn upside down, eyes blacked out. The last page read, "He said if I go with him, I can bring them back." I burned the tent, tore the trail markers down, tried to pretend I never saw it. That night, I heard the humming, high-pitched, childlike, floating through the trees like it was carried by the wind, except the trees weren't moving. I stuffed my ears with toilet paper. Didn't help. The humming wasn't outside. It was in my head. I started walking toward the lake before I even realized I'd gotten out of bed. It was like sleepwalking, only I was awake. Every part of me wanted to run, to scream, to hide. But my legs moved on their own. When I got to the edge of the lake, the water was still, but something was rising out of it. A head, a boy's face, pale as bone, hair dripping, eyes wrong, just deep, endless voids. No nose, no mouth, just holes. He didn't blink. He just stared. And then he smiled. I backed away. Something inside me snapped. I ran. I don't even remember getting back to the cabin, just locking the door and covering every window with blankets. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. When morning came, I packed. Didn't leave a note. Didn't return the journal. I quit that day. Moved states, changed numbers. But last week a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a whistle. The same one. And underneath it, a single piece of paper, folded once, stained with lake water. It read, "It's your turn to watch him now." Sometimes late at night, I hear humming.
Story number 5.
I never believed in haunted objects. Ghost stories? Sure. Places, maybe. But not things. Not until I worked the night shift Ridgeway Storage. I was just a temp, one of those odd jobs you take between college semesters, check IDs, monitor the cameras, walk the units every few hours. Boring. Easy. Until Unit 440. It wasn't rented out, not technically. The logbook showed it was in holding, but there was no record of payment. No name, just a warning written in permanent marker across the folder. Do not open under any circumstance. I thought it was a joke, scare the new guy, standard hazing. So of course, I opened it. Unit 440 was deep in the furthest corner of the facility, past rows of rusting metal doors and flickering overhead lights. The moment I turned the corner toward it, everything felt wrong. The air got heavier, denser, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes your skin crawl. The padlock was already open. Inside, the only thing in the unit was a trunk, an old wooden travel trunk, Victorian maybe, paint peeling, iron latches, initials carved into the top. EW. I crouched beside it, unsure if I was going to open it. Then the lights in the hallway went out. Just a flicker at first, then gone. The emergency lights didn't come on. My flashlight, full battery, dimmed until it was barely a candle glow. And from inside the unit, I heard knocking. Not from outside the trunk, from inside. 3 slow knocks. I backed away, heart thudding. I should have locked it back up. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I opened the trunk. Empty. No compartments, no false bottom, no hidden corners. Just dust and old rotted fabric. But then I looked at my flashlight, dead. And yet the inside of the trunk was glowing. Not brightly, but faintly, just enough to see the shadows bend in the wrong direction. That's when I heard whispering. Not from the trunk this time, but behind me. I turned. No one, but on the floor of the hallway, wet footprints. Bare feet, small, child-sized. They led from the trunk, around me, and disappeared into the wall. I slammed the trunk shut and ran. Locked the unit, double-checked it, turned in the logbook without saying a word. I didn't sleep that day. Or the next. And then it got worse. Unit 440 started unlocking itself. The cameras never caught anyone near it, but every night on my rounds, I'd find the padlock lying on the floor. Sometimes the door would be cracked open. Once, I found the trunk dragged halfway into the hallway. But the worst part? Things started following me home. At first, it was just static on my TV. Then I'd find dirt on my carpet, wet footprints in my hallway, the smell of rotting wood. And every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., I'd hear 3 knocks on my front door. I never opened it. Until the 4th night. I was done pretending I wasn't terrified. I had a bat in one hand, my phone in the other. I crept to the door, counted to 3, and flung it open. No one. Just a package on the floor. Brown paper. Twine. No address. No label. Inside was a small carved figurine, looked hand-whittled. A child, hollow eyes, and beneath it, a note. You opened it. Now you keep it. I threw the thing out. It came back. No matter where I dumped it, garbage bin, river, fire, it always found its way back to my apartment. Once it was waiting on my pillow. Another time in the fridge. Always with that same note. Then I started hearing the scratching from inside my walls, my closets, my bed frame, like something with long nails pacing just behind the drywall. I moved apartments. Twice. It followed. One night, I caught a glimpse of it in the reflection of my bathroom mirror. A face. A child's face, but wrong. Skin too stretched, eyes too wide, smile like it had been carved into the skull with a knife. It was behind me. I turned. Nothing there. But when I looked in the mirror again, my own reflection was gone. Just the thing. Staring out. Watching. Smiling. I smashed the mirror. The next day, I quit the job. Drove across the country, changed my name, threw away every piece of tech, every mirror, every screen. And for a while it worked, until last week. I woke up in the middle of the night. Room was dark, air was cold, and something was off. There was a trunk at the foot of my bed. Old, wooden, carved with 2 letters, E-W. And before I could move, before I could scream, the lid slowly began to open. No hands, no sound, just rising, creaking. Inside was the figurine, smiling. And then I heard the whisper right behind my ear, "Now you're the box." I can't sleep. I can't look at my reflection, because sometimes it isn't me looking back.
Story number 6.
My sister disappeared in 2017. Not ran away, not kidnapped, vanished. One minute she was in her room, FaceTiming her friend, and the next, nothing. Phone still warm. Cup of tea half full, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no tracks in the snow, just gone. Her name was Ava, 19, bright, obsessed with urban legends, internet horror stories, creepy forums. The darker, the better. I thought it was a phase. A way to cope with how weird our house was. Because our house was weird. It was old, real old, built in 1883, creaky floorboards, narrow hallways, and one of those basements where the walls sweat in the summer. But the weirdest part? The attic. Our parents never let us go up there. It was always locked. When we asked, they'd brush it off. Just insulation, they said. Dangerous flooring. But we heard things at night. Sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Furniture scraping. Whispers. Once when I was 10, I put my ear to the attic door and swore I heard someone breathing. Then Ava disappeared. Cops searched everywhere. Dogs, helicopters, media. Nothing. No evidence. No leads. Just a mystery. My parents broke after that. Mom started drinking. Dad stopped speaking. And I was left in a house that suddenly felt hungry. A week after she vanished, I started having the dreams. Always the same. I'd wake up in a version of our house, but darker, longer, wrong. The walls were warped. The air smelled like rot. And from upstairs, I'd hear someone calling my name. Not shouting. Whispering. It sounded like Ava. Ellie, come see. The first few nights I refused to go. I'd wake myself up, turn on every light, but then one night the dream changed. I wasn't walking. I was pulled. My feet slid along the warped wood like I was on rails, and the attic door was open. Beyond it, a staircase that didn't exist in the real house. Steep, endless, covered in old, brittle wallpaper that peeled like dead skin. At the bottom was a room, and in the center, my sister. Back turned, long hair matted, wearing the same hoodie she vanished in. I called to her. She didn't move. When I got closer, I saw what she was looking at. A mirror. Cracked, old. The reflection didn't show her face. It showed mine, but smiling in a way I wasn't. Then she finally turned around. It wasn't Ava anymore. It looked like her. But the eyes were hollow. Her mouth hung open, too wide, too still, and her voice came out flat, echoing, "You shouldn't have followed." I woke up screaming. After that, I stopped sleeping. I started researching everything. Old blueprints of the house, family records, newspapers. That's when I found it. The house had another name once, the Harrow House. Back in 1891, the attic wasn't an attic. It was a servant's floor. And one of those servants, Eleanor Wren, was accused of killing 4 children before vanishing into thin air. Guess what her initials were? EW. I found an article about the house being cursed. Tenants went missing. Some claimed to see doubles of themselves. One man went mad and clawed his own eyes out, screaming about mirrors that lie. I confronted my mom. She broke down and admitted it. When Ava was born, they found a hidden room behind the attic wall. Inside was an old mirror, wrapped in cloth, nailed to the wall. They didn't touch it, just sealed the room and locked the attic. Because the mirror didn't reflect things. It showed versions, worse versions. And sometimes it let them out. I didn't believe it. I couldn't. Until one night, I heard my sister's voice again. Not in a dream, not in my head. She was laughing. Soft, strange laughter that turned into weeping. I couldn't help it. I had to look. I had to see. The attic door was unlocked. Inside, it was cold, much colder than it should have been. Dust thick in the air like snow. And in the far corner, the wall looked wrong, like it had been patched quickly, sloppily. I peeled it back. Behind it, the hidden room and the mirror. It was massive, iron frame, cracked glass. And when I looked into it, my reflection wasn't right. She blinked out of sync with me. Then she smiled and said with my voice, but too flat, too slow, "You were always the weaker one." The lights went out. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up in my room, no bruises, no blood, just the mirror sitting at the foot of my bed. No one else saw it. Not my parents, not the police. They said I was having a breakdown, that the stress of Ava's disappearance had caught up with me. But the mirror is still here, and now things are wrong. Sometimes I see people pass my door twice, but they only walked by once. My phone rings, and when I answer, it's me, breathing on the other end. My reflection lags a second behind, like it's waiting. And last night, I saw my sister again. She was standing behind me in the mirror. Eyes dark, mouth open in a silent scream, hands pressed to the glass like she was trapped. I think that mirror is a door, and I think I'm next.
Story number 7.
There's a man who stands at the end of my driveway every night. I don't know when he started showing up, maybe a month ago, maybe longer. I only noticed him because of my dog. She'd start growling at exactly 2:14 a.m. every night, pacing near the front window, staring at nothing. Except it wasn't nothing. It was him. He doesn't move. He just stands there. Always in the same spot, middle of the driveway, facing the house, wearing a long gray coat, pale skin, no hair, eyes so wide they reflect the porch light. I called the police the first time. They came 20 minutes later. By then, he was gone. They told me I must have imagined it. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. But I know he was. My dog knew too. She wouldn't go near the window for the rest of the night. The next night, he was back. Same time, same place. Just standing. I tried confronting him once. Grabbed a flashlight, walked outside, and called out, "Hey! Who are you?" No answer. He didn't even flinch. I took a few steps forward and shined the light on his face. That's when I realized he wasn't looking at the house. He was looking past it, through it, like something was behind me. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back, he was gone. I checked the cameras the next day, motion activated floodlights, porch cams, everything. And the weird thing is, they glitched out between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m. every night, like someone was erasing the footage or something. After a week, I stopped sleeping. Every night, I sat in the living room with the lights off, waiting, watching. And every night at exactly 2:14, he appeared. I started noticing small things, objects moving, lights flickering. My dog would whimper at walls. Then one night I blinked, and he was closer. Not the end of the driveway anymore. Now halfway up it. Next night, closer still. By the fifth night, he was on the porch. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe. I just sat there hidden behind the couch, phone clutched in my hand, too scared to dial, because now I could hear him. Not footsteps. Breathing. Deep. Wet. Wrong. Like lungs that didn't understand how to work. When I finally got the courage to look through the peephole, he wasn't there. But the porch light was flickering, and something had been scratched into the wood. "I see you too." I didn't sleep after that. The next day I stayed at a friend's house, left the lights on at home, left music playing, left cameras rolling, but I checked the footage remotely. And there he was, 2:14 a.m., standing in the living room, not outside, inside. Just standing, staring at the ceiling like he could see me no matter where I went. When I got home, there were no signs of a break-in, but the couch had been moved, my bedroom door was wide open, and in the center of the bed was a single object I hadn't owned before. A key. Old. Iron. Cold. Attached was a note written in spidery black ink, "Use it or I will." I didn't sleep that night, didn't eat, didn't move. By the next morning, my dog was missing. No door was open, no window cracked. She just disappeared. I found scratches on the inside of the closet door, like she'd been trying to claw her way out. And behind the coats was a small hatch in the wall I'd never seen before. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a passage. Narrow. Pitch black. The air smelled like mold and something worse, like old blood. I couldn't see the end of it, but I heard whispers. Thousands of them. All at once, like the air was full of mouths. All saying the same thing over and over. "Let him in." I boarded the hatch, burned the key, moved across the country, new house, new locks, new name. But last night at exactly 2:14 a.m., I saw a notification on my phone. Motion detected. Front driveway. I opened the camera feed, and there he was, closer than ever, smiling.
Story number 8.
In 2019, my father died alone in a cabin deep in the Appalachian woods. He was a survivalist, obsessed with living off the grid away from the watchers, as he called them. Paranoid, but harmless. Or so I thought. We hadn't spoken in years. He believed I was one of them after I joined the military. His letters got stranger every year, rambling about shadows that moved on their own, voices behind walls, people who looked human but weren't. I chalked it up to mental illness, PTSD, isolation, age. When he died, heart failure, according to the coroner, I was the only next of kin. So I drove out to the cabin to settle his affairs. It was 2 days into the forest. No phone signal, no power lines, just a rotting wood structure surrounded by silent trees that seemed to lean too closely. From the outside, the place looked abandoned, but inside, it was like he'd left minutes ago. The kettle still had warm water. The fireplace was smoldering. His journal was open on the table, mid-sentence. "They almost got me last night. One spoke through the voice of your mother. I nearly let it in. My mother had been dead for 12 years. I wanted to leave, but part of me needed closure, needed to understand why he went mad. So I stayed the night. That was my first mistake. The second was reading more of the journal. He wrote about mirrors, said they were windows for them, that they couldn't enter without permission, but they could watch, always watch. He had covered every mirror in the house with thick black paint, except one, a handheld mirror in his desk drawer, wrapped in cloth, nailed shut. Curious and stupid, I unwrapped it. The mirror was old, cracked, the kind you'd see in a Victorian dollhouse. I only glanced at it for a second, but what I saw still keeps me up at night. It didn't show me. It showed the room behind me, but warped, like it had been abandoned for centuries. The walls were rotting, the fireplace was dead, and in the corner stood something tall, thin, and pale. Watching. I turned around. Nothing. I smashed the mirror and buried the pieces outside. That night I dreamed of my father, except it wasn't a dream. I woke up to the sound of someone pacing in the next room. Slow, dragging footsteps. I grabbed his rifle and crept out, but the room was empty. The footprints weren't. Wet, muddy prints in the shape of bare feet leading from the back door to the chair where he died. The fireplace had gone cold again, and carved into the wood above it were 3 words, "Still watching you." I packed up. I was done. But when I got outside, my truck was gone. Not stolen. Vanished. No tire tracks, no broken branches, just gone. I hiked out the next morning. Took 12 hours longer than it should have. Every time I looked back, I swore I saw someone just out of frame, stepping behind a tree. No matter how fast I walked, the feeling of being watched never left. When I made it back to town, my eyes were sunburned from exposure, even though it was cloudy the entire time. They told me I had mirror burn. I'd never heard of that before. I tried to forget. Moved to a city, got a job, started over, but strange things kept happening. My reflection started blinking at the wrong times. Lights flickered when I looked into the bathroom mirror. Sometimes I'd walk past store windows and see someone else walking in my place. Same clothes, same face, but smiling when I wasn't. Then the messages started. Not on paper, in reflections. Written in condensation, on windows. On the bathroom mirror after a shower. "Let us see you." I don't know how they followed me, but last night everything changed. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something wrong in the mirror. The hallway behind me was longer than it should have been. Way longer. And at the very end of it, barely visible, stood me. Staring. Smiling, not moving. I spun around. Empty hallway. But when I turned back, the reflection was gone. Except now, the mirror had a crack, right down the center. And this morning, there was dirt on my floor, like someone had stepped out of the wall. I don't use mirrors anymore. Not even phone cameras. No screens, no reflections. But I keep seeing things in puddles. In windows, in the shine of someone else's glasses. Always the same face. Mine. Watching. Smiling. Waiting for the moment I stop looking away.
Story number 9.
They say if you drive down Narrow Pines Road after midnight, you'll see her. But you're not supposed to stop. I didn't believe it either. Ghost stories are common in small towns, especially ones surrounded by endless forest. Narrow Pines Road cuts through one of the thickest. It's about 7 miles of winding, crumbling asphalt. No lights, no signs, no cell signal, just trees. Tall, endless trees. The story goes like this. Sometime in the 1950s, a woman was found wandering the woods in a blood-soaked dress. No ID, no shoes, just humming. When the sheriff tried to question her, she screamed so violently her voice tore. They locked her up in the local asylum. She escaped 2 nights later. Her body was never found. But the nurses, 3 of them were discovered hanging from a tree just off Narrow Pines Road, their mouths sewn shut with black thread. People say her spirit never left the woods, that she shows herself to drivers who are alone, late at night, always wearing white, always standing on the side of the road. And if you stop, well, no one who stopped ever told the story themselves. I didn't believe it. I'm not a thrill seeker or a ghost hunter. I'm a delivery driver. I got rerouted one night thanks to construction and ended up on that road around 12:43 a.m. GPS blinked out, music cut to static. I didn't think much of it at first, figured the signal was just bad. Then I saw her. She was standing on the right side of the road. Pale skin, long black hair, a white nightgown stained at the hem, barefoot, facing the woods, not me. At first, I thought she might be in trouble, some lost hiker or drunk or domestic abuse victim. I slowed down, rolled the window down a crack. "You okay?" She didn't move, didn't even flinch. The forest was dead silent. I started to put the car in park when I remembered the story. Something about the angle of her neck, the way her arms hung like they weren't connected right, it made me pause. Then she turned around, but not like a person turns. Her whole body twisted at the waist, like a marionette being yanked by a bad puppeteer. Her head stayed perfectly level, tilted to one side. Her eyes were black, not dark, not shadowed. Black, like holes. She opened her mouth, and I heard my own voice. It came out of her mouth, word for word, something I'd said earlier that night on the phone. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up." except the tone was wrong. Robotic. Croaked. It sounded like someone trying to be me but not quite understanding how. Then she started walking toward the car. I hit the gas. She didn't run, but the faster I went, the closer she got. In the rearview mirror, I watched her gliding behind me, her feet never touching the ground, her head slowly rotating. No matter how fast I drove, the distance never increased. I drove for 20 minutes. No turns, no intersections, no signs, just that same stretch of decaying road. And her, always behind me. I don't know how long it lasted. Time felt weird, like I was stuck in a loop, like the road was wrapping in on itself. Eventually, my headlights caught something ahead. A sign. Welcome to Narrow Pines. Again, I'd passed that same sign over an hour ago. That's when I realized my car's clock was blinking again. I stopped the car. I didn't want to, but I had to. I stepped out. The air was thick, heavy like syrup. The trees didn't move. No wind, no sound, except her. She was already standing in front of me, 10 feet away. I didn't hear her approach. She raised one hand and pointed to the forest. Then she opened her mouth again. And this time I heard my mother's voice, except she's been dead for 6 years. You left me, she said. Why didn't you come back? I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, but all I could do was stare as the forest behind her began to shift. The trees bent backward. Something enormous was moving between them, not walking, slithering. I don't remember getting back in the car. I just remember waking up in my driveway, the front bumper of the car covered in pine needles, dirt, and blood I couldn't explain. The clock on the dashboard said 2:14 Spenstrop. My phone had no recent calls, no texts, but in the photos folder was a single new image, a screenshot of my own face, taken from the back seat. I live in the city now, never went back, sold the car. I haven't driven at night since, but sometimes around 2:14 a.m. I wake up to humming, coming from the hallway. And when I check my phone, there's always a new photo, a new angle, closer than the last.
Story number 10.
I used to work nights at a long-term care facility. It was an old building, 3 floors, flickering lights, and a strange hum that came from the basement that maintenance could never fix. I was a night nurse. 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most of the residents were quiet, either asleep or too sedated to make much noise. Except for one room, room 313. No one stayed in that room for long. They always requested transfers, no specific reason. Just, I can't sleep in there, or I hear things at night. A few even claimed the walls breathed. We used it as overflow when we had no other choice. Then a new patient came in, Mr. Rivas, late 60s, no next of kin, no visitors. He didn't speak much, but he seemed calm. We put him in room 313, and that was the beginning of everything. At first, it was little things. The light above his door would flicker constantly, even after being replaced. His call button would go off at random, always when I was the only one on the floor. But when I checked on him, he was never the one who called. He just sat there staring at the wall. Not the window, not the TV, the wall, every time. After a week, I asked him about it. Is there something wrong with the room? He turned to me, eyes cloudy, voice raspy. It's thin here, he said. What is? He looked back at the wall. The skin. I didn't press him, figured it was dementia. But that night, something changed. It was 3:13 a.m. I remember because I checked my watch right after the scream. It came from room 313. I ran down the hall, unlocked the door, and froze. Mr. Rivas was standing in the corner, facing the wall, his forehead pressed so hard against it, I could hear the plaster cracking. His fingers were bent back, dislocated, scratching at something. I grabbed him, pulled him away. His skin was ice cold. He looked at me and whispered, "It's opening." We transferred him the next morning. But I had to finish the shift. That night, the room was empty. I passed it once every round, like always, but around 3:10 a.m. I heard something from inside. Whispering, not one voice, 100, layered, choking, wet. I opened the door. The room was dark, freezing, and the wall he'd stared at was different. It wasn't painted anymore. It was raw, flesh-colored, veiny, pulsing. And in the center was something that hadn't been there before, a hole, small, black, breathing. I stepped closer, couldn't help it. Something about it pulled me in. As I leaned forward, a voice came from inside it. High-pitched, childlike. "Help me, please." It sounded like my little sister, except she died when I was 12. I backed up, slammed the door, called security, but by the time they came, the wall was back to normal. Just drywall. The hole was gone. I thought maybe I'd hallucinated. Sleep deprivation, stress. But when I got home and undressed, I noticed something on my chest. A handprint, small, burned into the skin like a brand. That night, I dreamed of the room, except I was inside the wall, trapped in flesh, smothered in muscle and bone. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. All around me were other faces, mouths open in silent screams, pressed into the living tissue like fossils. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding, and my sheets were covered in black mold. I quit the job that morning, but the dreams haven't stopped. And now, every night at exactly 3:13 a.m., I wake up to something scratching behind my bedroom wall, soft at first, then faster, then pounding, like something is trying to claw its way through. I moved apartments, twice. It follows. I boarded up the wall last week, covered it in furniture, but last night I saw something impossible, a crack, in the middle of my mirror, not the glass, the reflection. And through it, I saw a hallway, long, cold, hospital lights buzzing overhead. At the end of the hallway was room 313. The door was open, and just before I woke up, something stepped through the mirror, smiling. Tonight, I won't sleep, because I know what's behind the wall now. And it knows I'm listening.